Jumbo.
Jumbo.
Welcome. You are listening to Operation Power, a voice for Black radical politics and revolutionary change. I'm your co-host, Inez Barron. We come to you each Thursday at this time on Black Power Media Reloaded, and I'm joined each week with my husband of 43 years.
That's my line. I'm supposed to do that part.
The bold, the outspoken, the indomitable, the one and only, the unbought, the unbossed.
Charles Barron, and she took my line. I humbly share this stage with my wife of 43 years.
Thank you.
Stunningly beautiful.
Thank you.
But even more intellectually brilliant.
Thank
the
you so
bold,
much.
The one and only, Inez Barron.
Right. And we're going to be using our African names. And my African name is Kamara
Baruti. And my African name is Shomari Baruti. Her name means experienced teacher. My name means forceful teacher.
And we're particularly pleased to be using our African names because those were names that were given to us as we became members of the Shrine of the Black Madonna. And one of our exciting guests that we're going to be having tonight on our topic is also in the leadership of the Shrine of the Black Madonna, and we'll be meeting her shortly. But we're so pleased that you're joining with us, and we want to just start with a libation. We believe...
Also, we got to mention also we'll have coming on after the Bishop, Dijanaba Akita, the Reverend Dr. Herbert Daughtry, who unwrapped the European contamination of Christianity and presented it in its African essence. And we will always eternally be members of the House of the Lord Church.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to begin with a libation. We have a video of a libation that we want to share with you because we realize that our ancestors paved the way for us to be here. We may not know all of their names. We may not know all of the things that they have done, but we want to take this time to acknowledge those ancestors that brought us to this point and have passed the baton on to us to move forward.
Important happens without a libation. And so for this very important presentation, we begin by the pouring of libation. We pour libation first to our first ancestor, to that hidden one who, though hidden, manifests in all things as all things, that God-goddess idea in the universe by any and all names. To our first ancestor, we pour libation, Ashe. We pour libation too to our ancestors because they were the first people on this planet, mothers and fathers of all mankind, flashpoint of the human family. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to our ancestors because they were the ones who first gave birth to the idea of civilization, knew we would need a form of governance, and they nurtured that idea along the Nile until it reached its zenith in Kemet. There they built these gigantic monuments as evidence of that great civilization, and they carved instructions on the walls of temples and tombs for us, so we would never forget. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to our ancestors because over time they put together all the tenets of civilization and they took those ideas and left the continent. They were the people of the first Exodus. They left Africa and went all over the world and peopled the world. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. We pour libation too to our ancestors because they did not sit on their laurels. They continued to improve, continued to evolve, and at each point of evolution, they again would leave the continent and settle and resettle the planet. They met themselves coming and going. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to those ancestors because over time, they found themselves the object of a forced exodus when they were kidnapped, shackled, cargoed, shipped out of Africa and enslaved in diasporas around the world. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to the ancestors left at home, the very young, the aged, the infirm, left to reinvent themselves, depleted of us, human resources. But they were enjoined by us in the diasporas, both objects of a global myopia that ruptured the soul of a people as it ravaged a continent. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour a libation too to those ancestors because over time they began to remember who and what they were. Because no matter where they had been dropped off, they still retained bits and pieces of who and what they were. They retained that African core that described them. They began to remember bits and pieces of a song. They began to remember lines from a rhythm. They began to remember dances that they did in ancient times. They began to remember those ancient drum beats that they now beat out on bare skin. And so to those ancestors, we pour libation. Ashe. Pour libation too to them because they then began to teach each other. They began to resurrect and reconstruct that history and that culture. They became the new Africans wherever they were. They became the new teachers, preachers, archaeologists, the new singers, dancers, the new drummers, the new Jaliyah. They reconstructed that history and our culture and became new Africans everywhere. So to those ancestors, we pour libation. Ashe.
Ashe.
Pour libation to the
Asheo.
Yes, thank you so much. We are so pleased to be able to talk about the ancestors, and we're going to go all the way back. The title of our program today is Jesus, African in Origin and Revolutionary in Action. That's our topic for today, and we're excited about that. But we
Very
also
excited.
have a brief video that we want to share with you about Operation Power so that you get a snippet of who we are and what we do. We're located in the East New York section of Brooklyn, and we have been around doing the hard work in our community, and we're going to share that video with you, just a brief portion of that.
Operation Power stands for people organizing and working for empowerment and respect.
Operation Power is a grassroots social justice organization founded by local community stakeholders, which includes activists, organizers, and leaders who understand that the system as it is currently structured is destroying us and our communities.
The system, the capitalist system, one that promotes human greed over human need, one that promotes profit over people, needs to be dismantled. These local community organizers recognize capitalism needs to be destroyed and replaced with socialism.
Operation Power was founded in 1997 with the understanding that uprooting capitalism needs to begin locally. Operation Power understood that our communities are the perfect vehicle to dismantle this parasitic capitalist system brick by brick, and the economic, political, and cultural institutions and other systems in place in our local community infrastructure.
Thank you, Kiru, our engineer, Kiru Gichuru. We're going to briefly talk about 3 books that we want to bring to your attention. They are in another portion of the video that talks about Operation Power. The first book is, in fact, called Speaking Truth to Power, and it is a collection of articles which Charles has written over the years. And we invite you to get a copy. You can get it online by going to Barnes & Noble. The second book is It's Not You, It's Capitalism. And this is a very clear, succinct introduction to the topic of capitalism. And the author is none other than our great friend, Malika Jabali. We encourage you to get that. The next book is, in fact, a novel. It's called Black Rising, and it is a page turner.
Yes, it is.
Once you start it, you won't put it down until you finish. It's written by Kevin Barron, another member of Operation Power. The second book in the trilogy is called Black Rising, Home and Abroad. It's a novel again by Kevin Barron. And the last book in the trilogy is called The Threat. So we invite you to get these 3 books. You can get them online at Barnes & Noble. And they are exciting, they're informative, and they're informational. Thank you so much. Well, here we are. Our program today, Jesus, African in Origin and Revolutionary in Action.
And the reason we chose that topic, because it's around Christmas time, and the capitalist system exploits us economically. Too many families go into debt, have a lot of anxieties around Christmas time. So if we're going to deal with Christ, then we want to deal with the biblical Christ. And we got this topic because I was a student under the Reverend Dr. Herbert Daughtry, and he had written a piece called Jesus Christ, African in Origin, Revolutionary and Redeeming in Action. So we wanted to get the two institutions that both of us have so much admiration for and has done so much to put our spiritual life in order, and that's the House of the Lord Church and the Shrine of the Black Madonna. And we're going to start off with Bishop from the Shrine of Black Madonna. Inez?
Thank you so much. Our first guest, oh, there she is, Bishop Dijanaba Akita of the Shrine of
Greetings.
Black Madonna. Welcome. We're so glad that you're here with us. And just to give a little background for our listeners, a native of Detroit and now presently in Houston, Texas, where she was a public school, elementary school teacher and a mentor for teachers. She holds degrees from University of Houston as well as Erskine Theological Seminary. She's a part of the leadership of the Shrine of the Black Madonna. She was ordained as a minister in 1978, and she was one of the founding members of the Shrine of the Black Madonna in Atlanta. So we're so pleased to be able to say that she's been a model for us. She's a mother of two and the grandmother, a doting grandmother, she says, of 3 granddaughters. And we're so pleased. She's a beautiful spirit. She's a wonderful person. And we're so pleased that she's joined us today on our program. And we're going to turn it over to you so that you can begin our topic, Jesus, African in Origin and Revolutionary in Action.
Thank you so much. I'm really proud and honored to be on your program. I know you could have invited other guests, but you thought of me, and that's really a wonderful thing. You know, when you talk about Jesus, Black, African in origin, and revolutionary, it has become second nature to me because I grew up in the Shrine. You know, I joined as a teenager, and throughout my adult life, I came to understand the African origins of Christianity. Christianity, like all major religions, originated in Africa because we know that Africa is the birthplace of civilization.
That's right.
So why not understand that religion came out of that experience as well? Now, when we talk about Jesus, you know, one of the things that people say, you know, it doesn't matter what color he is. I say, okay, well then since he's Black, it shouldn't matter.
That's right.
If it doesn't matter what color he is. But what they're really saying is they want to keep the same fixed image of Jesus that they have grown up to know. But one of the things I call to mind is I say, you can use a biblical text to prove the Blackness of Jesus if you want. You know, for example, the word Egypt is used in the Bible over 700 times. During the birth story, one of the birth stories they talk about in Matthew, they describe Joseph and Mary having to hide from Herod, who wanted to kill the upcoming Messiah. And they said, go down to Egypt. Well, we all know where Egypt is.
That's right.
Egypt is in Africa, even though they try to make it seem like it's the Middle East.
Right.
Rather than a part of Africa. So how can you hide in Egypt if you were not Black? And even when you talk about the biblical nation of Israel, they came into being in Egypt. Moses was raised by Pharaoh's daughter. He could have been raised by the daughter to be her son if he didn't look like one of the Egyptians.
That's right.
When Jethro saw him, you know, when he had to flee to Midian, he asked his daughters, who was this person that they had brought home? They said, he's an Egyptian, because they all look the same.
That's right.
So we're talking about the African origins of Christianity. You know, one of the things we had to think about is the fact that African people were responsible for all major religions. And when we think about religion, for African people, it was a way of life. Now, that doesn't mean that it hasn't been used or abused, but we have to understand the context in which it was created. When we talk about Jesus and his movement, he was a revolutionary. He wasn't crucified because he was teaching love and happiness.
That's right. That's right.
He was stirring up the people. When he talked about his mission, he said, the Spirit of the Lord has been given to me and has known me to bring good news to the poor.
That's right.
Set at liberty those who are captive.
That's right.
To set the oppressed free. If Jesus was around now, they would definitely crucify him again because of this current climate that we're in, because they looked at people who are talking about speaking up for the oppressed as being abnormal or being other than a part of the system, the racist system that we're a part of today. So Jesus was truly a Black man. And if you talk about the Black Madonna, now our church is called the Shrine of the Black Madonna.
Right.
But there are Black Madonnas all around the world.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the Catholic Church, they have a Black Madonna in the Vatican. There was one Pope, John Paul, when he visited America, they said they had to get a picture of the Black Madonna because he had the Black Madonna in Poland, which was his,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
his birthplace. But we have a hard time accepting it because we have been caught up in a system that teaches us that there's something wrong with being Black.
Mm-hmm.
That when you're Black, you're other than. But that's a part of the racist society that we're a part of. But when we talk about the Shrine of the Black Madonna, we believe that the church should be a nurturing environment because Mary was an example of a mother who nurtured
Mm-hmm.
her people as well as her son.
You know, you make an excellent point, and that's why I wanted you on and Reverend Daughtry on, because, you know, being in the revolutionary struggle, a lot of my revolutionary comrades are materialists who don't believe in God, and that's their right. But they also we have Marxists who think because Marxists said religion is the opium of the people, that you can't talk that stuff in Africa or to Black people about religion being some opium. Now, there are some pastors are opium. There are some religions in Europe that are opiistic. But the bottom line is what you said. He was African and revolutionary in origin. Tell us a little bit about Jaramogi Ebebe Ajamin. He was originally known as Reverend Clegg. He was very close to Malcolm X, and how he emerged this ministry called the Shrines of the Black Madonna.
Well, the Shrine of the Black Madonna was unveiled in 1967 in Detroit, Michigan. And Reverend Albert B. Clegg Jr., also known as Jaramogi Ebebe Ajamin, was the founder and first holy patriarch of our church. But he understood the Blackness, the historical Blackness of Jesus. And he understood also that as long as we had a theology, Black people had a theology that was otherworldly and not based on the true origins, the African origins, we would not be able to participate meaningfully in the struggle to liberate ourselves. You know, we were being oppressed and we were being denied basic rights. And we are spiritual people. You know, we come together because we understand the nature of communalism.
Mm-hmm.
Spirituality is a foundation of it. You know, we're not meant to be alone. That's why we always, you know, gather together in groups. You know, when you see brothers and sisters coming together, we always find each other.
That's
because
right.
it's a part of our African nature. We're communal. And the spirit is what allowed us to endure. So Jaramogi understood that just because we had a theology that was otherworldly, that could be changed.
Mm-hmm.
But the church was an institution that we could use to build power for ourselves. It was the only institution that we controlled. You know, we have churches on almost every corner.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can imagine the fact that we talked about using the church to build institutional power for ourselves. We don't have to look out for somebody else to work for us. We can do it for ourselves. And that's what we did. You know, right after slavery, the churches became mutual aid societies where they looked out for the community and provided services. And so he said that we can restructure the church so that it can become more meaningful. So we're not trying to be a springboard to heaven. We're trying to build a foundation that allows us to build an earthly kingdom that can build institutions that can work for the benefit of our people. And that's what Jaramogi taught us.
And that's an important piece that you're mentioning, because a lot of people think we're sitting around waiting for some, you know, spook from heaven to come down and liberate us, and we don't have to do nothing on earth because we're getting ours in paradise in heaven. That's not what revolutionary Christianity is all about. Talk more about the fact that you're very connected and founded on Marcus Garvey. And
Marcus Garvey had a church called the African Orthodox Church, where
That's
Bishop
right.
McGuire was the founder bishop of the church, and he had pictures of a black Messiah, as well as the Black Madonna, and he understood the African origins of Christianity as well. And Jaramogi was an astute follower of Marcus Garvey. And I also heard that Elijah Muhammad was also
that's right.
a student of Marcus Garvey. But nationalism was something that we understood meant that we could build an institution, we could build a nation within a nation, because the nation that we are part of is not looking out for our interests. And we can see with the elimination of DEI programs and affirmative action, they're letting us know who they really are, which they told us all along, but we just didn't believe it. We thought they had changed.
And you know, this is not a church that's sitting back waiting for nothing to come out of the sky. Matter of fact, you have a place called Beulah Land, 3,000 acres. And then, of course, you have cultural centers and bookstores. And talk more about the
Well, that's an institution, yeah.
Alternative institutions.
Right. Well, we understood that everything we needed, we could build for ourselves. We built it for other people, but we could build our own schools. And so we've created institutions like Akiba Land Academy, which was a school where we train young people. We started training our children how to read before they reached the age of 2. And we began to teach them not only just the basics, things about English and math and science, but their history, helping them to understand that they were part of a glorious history. So we also had programs during the week. We had a technological center before there were even computer centers in the community. You know, one of the programs we started in Atlanta when I was there, we had what we called a technological center. And I remember at one point, these executives came in from a major food chain and they said, where did you get these computers? Because back in the early 80s, there were not a lot of PCs in the community. And I told them that we were trying to teach our children how to do it. So they ended up preparing a program where they had people come and bring in their cash register receipts, and then they started buying computers for the schools. But we were already trying to teach our children how to compete in a technological world. We put together community service centers where we could have resources so our children, so the people in the community could be serviced, to find out what resources we needed to help ourselves. We put together a law center. We built a medical center. We also had housing institutions where we were training young missionaries to go out and do work and become full-time missionaries in the church. But our greatest achievement, or one of our greatest achievements, was the purchase of a 4,000 acre farm in South Carolina. And we call it Beulah Land. And this was done from the sacrifices and investments of members, not wealthy donors, not corporate people, but individuals who over a course of 20 years saved up our money, and we raised enough money so we were able to purchase those acreage of land in South Carolina.
See, this is awesome.
And that's an example of what we call Black self-determination.
There you go.
Well, we're doing it for ourselves. And it's a beautiful thing when you can come on the land and say, this is something that belongs to us. It belongs to Black people. This is something that we said we can develop, we can raise, you know, different entities or different projects, enterprises, but it's all for the benefit of our community.
Well, Charles and I, Shamari and I, have been able to take a visit to Beulah Land, and it's certainly very inspirational to know that this is a project in reality that people sacrificed for, and it's there and it's being utilized. I know you have summer programs, summer camp for your children there. And I'm always interested by the stories that you tell about the work that was done in Atlanta to establish Shrine Number 9, the sacrifices that were made, and how people went out and spread the word and asked the community for support. So talk briefly about how Shrine 9 came to be, where it is, what it was, and what it is now.
Well, in 1973, our founder, Jaramogi Obabe Ajaman, said that we needed to expand. We had a church in Detroit on Linwood and Hogarth, and we had expanded to parts of the city. On the east side, on Mack and Burns. We went to the northwest side on Livernois. And so he said we wanted to open up what we call the gateway to the South. And so they gave a call one Sunday morning in church. He said, if there are any students who are interested in going to Atlanta, because we want to start a church in Atlanta. We didn't have a church, but just the idea that we were going to start a church. So I was a student at the University of Michigan at the time. And when I had saw that we had the opportunity to go to Atlanta, and I could go to a historically Black college, which I missed being in Ann Arbor, I said, okay, I'll be one of the people to do that. So I went, along with 5 other students, and we began to organize on on the campuses. We met in the dormitory, common areas, and we talked about the need for us to come together. And one of the things we understood that as young people, we had the energy, we had the desire to look beyond what was there and could think about the possibilities of what could come. And so we worked for the next 2 years until we were able to purchase a building on Abernathy Boulevard, and the rest is history.
Well, we're very, very honored to say we are part of that ministry, and Bishop Mwenda, who's doing an awesome job. We appreciate the work he's doing in Atlanta. Talk a bit about 2 things before we get to Reverend Daughtry. I hope he can get on and join us. But the Maccabees, I was in the Black Panther Party, and we had the Black Liberation Army. You have to have something to secure and protect your nation and what you're building. And when you finish talking about that, talk about your churches in Africa.
Well, when we talk about the Holy Order of the Maccabees, it was a part of the security force in the church, but it was made up of young men and women who were willing to train and come to the service, and the main thing was to be of service. We weren't agitators, we were defenders and protectors. We understood that when you had property, you had to be able to defend your property. Mm-hmm. And so they studied and they trained physically, to make sure they were in the best of health. But their commitment was to make sure that we were able to maintain a peaceful environment. Because one thing we realized when we came into, we used to call the outside environment a culture that was based on trying to facilitate slave behavior. Mm-hmm. And so when you came into the shrine and said we had to change from our slave behavior and create a whole nother existence. And so we had to make sure that we had no slave behavior within our community. And so we would use wonderful techniques to enlighten ourselves, to show appreciation for each other. And one of the things we had to know, we didn't have to demean each other. We didn't have to call each other names, because I know that's a common practice among certain elements in the community to call people the B word or the N word. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the things we said, okay, we have to have respect for each other. We have to maintain decorum. And so in addition to protecting from any kind of thing that would be from the outside, we had to also realize that we had to change ourselves. We had to be transformed. We had to learn how to appreciate each other and how to trust each other, how to build caring relationships and be able to communicate and to see you and say, you know what, you're my sister, you're my brother. Mm-hmm. I appreciate you. I care for you and I want to support you. So it wasn't a competitive thing, but it was a sense of building a communal society. So the Maccabees were very instrumental in helping to maintain that structure.
You have another structure that I think is extremely important, and I've gone to several of their meetings, and that's the Black Slate. I remember even Jaramogi Bebe Ajaman was talking about, I think he ran for something with the Freedom Now Party.
Freedom Now Party in Detroit, right. Yes. He ran for governor of the state of Michigan. Mm-hmm. He also ran for councilman, but he was very instrumental in encouraging other members to become a part of the political system. Mm-hmm. One of the things that, the Black Slate is an independent organization that was created by members of our organization, but is also by other members in the community. But one of the things that was successful in helping the campaign of the first Black mayor of Detroit, Coleman Young, mm-hmm. and also the mayor in Atlanta, Maynard Jackson, as well as supporting Councilwoman Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick, who just recently transitioned, and Barbara Rose Collins in Detroit.
Well, I'm hoping to work with the Black Slate to run some of our people so that, sometimes we support these people, they get in and they forgot who got them in. So I'm trying
Right. Well, that was one thing the Black Slate is very intent. And that is, we want to make sure that the person who's on our slate is going to work for the community.
That's right.
So we're not looking necessarily just on what is your affiliation,
right? Mm-hmm.
Are you Black enough? But are you going to work for the community?
That's right.
Are you going to be the person accountable to what you said you were going to do, because people will make all kind of promises.
Yes,
Oh,
they
yeah.
do. Want that
But we have to hold them accountable for what they say they do. And we got to realize that we still have the power of the vote.
That's right. That's right.
You know, one of the things that I learned when I was growing up in Detroit is that you didn't dare say you weren't going to vote. Everybody in Detroit was voting. You would see a person hanging out on the corner in front of a liquor store, but he still knew who was on the ballot. Everybody was engaged and understood that we needed to do something to make a difference in our lives. And so the black slate is important. You know, my grandmother, she was not a radical person, but whenever she went to vote, she said, give me one of those black slates so I can know who's working for the community.
Right.
And it became a staple. People would come to me and say, you know what, when I was a little girl, my mother had a black slate and it's still here. And that is something, a testament to the fact that we are still, after 50 years, still doing the same thing, still able to maintain the sense of connectedness that is necessary for us to do something. And if we can just harness that energy, understand the power, that divinity that we have within us, that if we collectively come together, there's nothing that can stop us from what we're trying to do.
That's right.
And that's where that spirituality comes in. And I know a lot of young people, they kind of throw their hands up about the idea of being involved in the church. And I can understand if you think that the church is going to try to take you off to heaven. That's reasonable. But when you have an institution that can make sure that you can build power for yourselves, that's something that we can connect to.
That's right.
And we need a spiritual foundation for all the things that are happening to us in the world today. The spirit of our ancestors propels us each right here and right now.
That's right. That's right. You know what a lot of people don't realize, when I was reading some of the works of Jaramogi Abebe Ajima and Reverend Clegg, particularly the Black Messiah and Black Christian nationalism, a lot of people don't realize that in 1963 in Detroit, when they had the Great March, over 200,000 people showed up. This was in June, 2 months before the Great March on
Washington.
Jaramogi Abebe Ajima and Reverend Clegg helped organize that with Rosa Parks and others, where 200,000 people showed up. 80% of them were Black. And Reverend Clegg, he spoke right before Martin Luther King and brought the house down.
Absolutely.
This was the first time Dr. King made his famous speech, I Have a Dream. It wasn't in August in Washington, it was in Detroit in June. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I was too young to go, but I do remember my grandmother going. And I remember asking her, and I don't even know why I remember this particular date, but I remember her walking down the street, from the bus stop, because she had caught the bus downtown Detroit. We lived on what we call the east side of town. And when she came, she was all dressed up, and I knew it wasn't Sunday, because she would usually take me to church with her. And I asked her, I said, where have you been? She said, I went to a march downtown. And I said, well, what was it for? She said, it was Reverend Clegg and Reverend King. And they were telling us that we needed to do something for our people, that we needed to stand up, and it was time for us to stop waiting for somebody else to do for us what we could do for ourselves. And that stood out in my mind. Later on, I came to realize that it was that famous march in 1963. And if you fan out on some of the pictures where you see Dr. King, you see Jaramogi is in the row right behind him.
Right.
It was a phenomenal thing that many Black people would come together, because they understood that we were all we had.
That's right.
And if we came together, there was nothing that could stop us from accomplishing our goals. And that's the kind of movement that Jaramogi was constantly talking about, how we could come together and use our energies. And he had a way of becoming a hub in the Black community, so that different organizations found a home at the Shrine of the Black Madonna. Black authors, Black poets, Black writers who couldn't get into the white mainstream, they could always find a place at our cultural centers, and at the Shrine, they had a place to come. So different organizations could find, on the record, Message to the Grassroots, if you hear the prelude,
that's right.
Brother Malcolm talks about
Mm.
He was not a Christian, but if he was a Christian, he joined Shrine of the Black
That's
Madonna.
right. He sure did. He sure did. And he traveled a lot with Reverend Clegg Jaramogi. They became good friends, and Malcolm and Betty Shabazz, was working together with Jaramogi Bebe Ajamin. And see, that time was a powerful time, the 1960s, because revolutionary theology, Black liberation theology, James Cone, Reverend Daughtry, we waiting for him to come on. I know he had a prior program, and so he's trying to get him on. But when he comes on, he can talk more about some of the similar stuff. And I think that what's so powerful is that you're unwrapping the European contamination of Christianity and presenting it in its African revolutionary essence. And I think this is important for our people. Talk a little bit about the churches in Africa that you have.
Well, we have churches in Liberia, Ganta City. We have churches in Ghana. And we also have a group in Nigeria that have come together. But these churches, they reached out to us years ago looking for support. And they reached out with our bishop in Detroit, Bishop Mbayu Chui, who's in charge of our Pan-African ministries. And when they first sent out a plea for help or assistance, they thought we were white.
Mm.
They thought that, because we talked about the, missionary efforts, they didn't know that we were a Black church working for Black people. And when they met them, they were just really overwhelmed and excited about that. And they began to build programs. And one of the things we realized is that we were not trying to make a replica of the Shrine of the Black Madonna that they had to use in Africa, but that they could use their common theology and use it to magnify their interpretation of what it meant to be a member of the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church. We couldn't go in and tell them that they had to deny their customs or their native language, but they allowed them to build based upon their foundation. And really, that's what we actually did for Christianity. If we can get back to that topic. When we came to America, we were separated from our traditional religions. And we were given a different kind of theology that had no foundation to what we knew. But once we became aware of it, we began to use it for our benefit. So the Black preachers during the slavery period, they were able to use what little they could learn, and we could put our rituals in it. So when you go to a Black church, it's nothing like a white church. We have our own kind of rituals. We have our own kind of songs. We have our own way of communicating with each other. So really, when we look at religion, it's really a way of knowing how to be. And so we had to use but we recognize that the theology is what's limited. It's not the power of the church. It's the theology that limits us in our ability to act meaningfully in the world today.
Well, Bishop, talk to us briefly about the role of women and the sisters and sisterhood and the organizations and the positions that women have had historically in the Shrine of the Black Madonna.
Well, that was one thing I loved about the Shrine, that they didn't hold that against us. I remember as a teenager, because I joined when I was 17 years old. And Jaramogi, Reverend Albert Clegg, he asked me, he said, what is it that you want to do? And I said, I want to preach. And everybody in the room looked around and said, what? And he said, well, okay, if you want to preach, we're going to help you learn how to preach. Okay. And I said, well, I think I already know. He said, no, we're going to help you.
So
it is when you're a teenager, you think you know everything.
That's right. No limitations. So it's important.
But there was no limitations.
Right.
So we had women in the pulpit. So we weren't just in the background.
Right. Yeah.
And I remember even as I was ordained and started doing my ministerial duties, there were times when I would visit other churches and the people would say, well, we're waiting for your minister to come. And I said, I am the minister. And they would say, oh, and some didn't want me to sit on the pulpit, but because of their traditions. But that's one thing that the Shrine has never limited any woman in terms of the ability to function or participate in what we have women who are Maccabees, part of our security force, who were teachers, who were lecturers, who were preachers. We have there was no bias in
Mhm.
terms of what we could do. It was a testament to the fact that we were equal in all ways.
Well, if you see me looking down, I'm trying to get Reverend Daughtry on because this would have been an extremely great compliment to what you're presenting. I think you may be having some technical difficulties, but maybe, Gabriel, if you can find a video of his and we can play some of that. But Reverend Herbert Daughtry, I have to say that I wouldn't be where I am today without Reverend Herbert Daughtry. And we met, and I was a student at Hunter College, and I had done a program called In the Spirit of the 60s. And I invited Atala Shabazz, Malcolm X's daughter, Reverend Daughtry, and Richie Perez. And from there, I joined the Black United Front. He was the chairman of the National Black United Front. We had a meeting, a gathering of over 1,000 people in Brooklyn, New York in 1980. Over 1,000 people came from 40 different states and 5 foreign countries to start the National Black United Front. And he became the chairman of that. That was the leading force in the nation, and the leading force particularly in New York. We had that kind of force going on. We were around every issue, police brutality, you name it. He became the people's pastor, and Reverend Herbert Daughtry in the House of the Lord Church, who, by the way, I'm sure his wife is tuning in. She called us earlier, and that's Reverend Dr. Karen S. Daughtry, who is the present pastor of the House of the Lord Church. So I'm sure she's looking in. But they built the movement in New York, and then church became a place where everybody came. Joshua Nkomo came from Africa, Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael came on so many occasions. Every leader you can think of. We started the African People's Christian Organization. I was working with Reverend Daughtry on that. We had Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben, Abin Ban Sertima, you name it. And we've had it at the House of the Lord Church. So he was.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful to know. It's like we've been in synchronicity with each other.
That's why I want to go.
The same things you're talking about. The same people you're talking about are the
Exactly.
same. The same experience.
Now,
They were housed in our institutions.
All of them. See, that's why I wanted both of you on, because it was so much similar ministries. And matter of fact, Sister Karen Daughtry is on. I don't know if we can get her to come on some kind of way to fill in, if that's possible. But
step off and join.
That's the same thing that you were talking about. It's the same history of Reverend Daughtry. He's known all over the world. He went to different parts of Africa, even went to Ireland to support the Irish struggle. We went to the so-called Middle East, met with Yasser Arafat to support the Palestinians, the Iranian struggle, you name it. Muammar Gaddafi, Libyan struggle, South Africa. He was all over the world fighting for liberation, a true revolutionary Christian minister. And I wanted him to tell his own story because it's a powerful. He's 95 now. 95.
Wow.
Drives his family crazy because they wake up in the morning and he's gone. He's driving somewhere by himself, always videoing himself. I was honored to be his chief of staff and the Secretary General of the African People's Christian Organization. We traveled all over the country building chapters of the Black United Front. And then, it's not easy being a Christian in the revolutionary radical movement, with communists, socialists, you had to do those battles where we say communism ain't no big thing to us because that's communalism. We're familiar with that in the Bible. And Jesus said, I come not to bring peace, but a sword. Sell your garments, purchase a sword, and follow me. And in the last days of his life in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Peter cut off the soldier's ear, he didn't just carry that sword that night. He had that for a while. So Reverend Daughtry did all of that for me because I used to think Christianity was a white man's religion. But
just because they misused it doesn't mean that they own it.
There you go. So I wanted him on, and he has some books out. He has a book about his beloved community, which is an excellent book. and people should try to pick that up. So I don't know if we're going to have them on. Let me check to make sure.
And if you know,
Oh, yes, definitely.
The Black Messiah is original, one of the first books that we have from our
Oh, yes,
founder.
that's an excellent book. I have that one. Cairo said he does have a tape, if we could, when he's speaking on Palestine. So Cairo, bring that tape on Reverend Daughtry, and then we'll get back to Bishop DiGennaro.
How impressed they have been working so diligently, preparing since when? Yesterday. Let me welcome you to this church. It is known as the historic House of the Lord Church. It is a church that
Did you make it the whole screen?
the great issues of our time. It is a church that has supported human rights, self-determination for people all across the world. It's a church that has supported humanitarian efforts, one of our major enterprises has been on the Darfur issue. We were there, led the mass delegation just before the bombing in Iraq, and which we attempted to prevent that catastrophe. So we welcome you here to the House of the Lord Church. I am profoundly again impressed with the organizing. And what appealed to me when it first came to my attention was the humanitarian side of the issue. That I believe in one human family, and therefore wherever people are suffering, wherever people get victimized by war, wherever people cannot get the necessary means to sustain life, I would always touch my heart. So immediately I was asked to do a couple of things. Number one, I was asked if the church could be made available as the place from which the caravan would commence here in New York, of course, USA. And we readily consented to do so. And the second thing I was asked if I would want to accompany the delegation on the mission, to which I responded, sure, I would love to. It's a matter of hours. So what we are doing now is trying to work with our schedule, as we've been in touch with Kevin and Doris to try to work through our schedule. And if we can work through our schedule, then I'll be so honored and profoundly moved to accompany the caravan. So again, we wish you have our prayers, best wishes that you might arrive at your destination. And indeed, the day might be hastened, that peace might be in the area, that all of the people might live together as one human family. Thank you very much.
See, that was that's the House of the Lord Church. That was Reverend Herbert Daughtry. The audio wasn't as clear, but he always opened the church to movements. Remember Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney from Georgia. She had gone to the Middle East. They took her boat and they put her in prison. And that's why we say free them all. Somebody said free us all. But he was able to have that at the House of the Lord Church and so many other events. Matter of fact, I went to the Middle East and I was representing us, and we brought food to the Palestinians. I went to the Gaza Strip with Cynthia McKinney and with Dead Prez, Mutulu from Dead Prez. I was able to go to Zimbabwe representing Reverend Herbert Daughtry. They had the All Conference of Churches in Zimbabwe, met with Robert Mugabe, and was able to meet with presidents of different countries as I traveled throughout Africa representing Reverend Dr. Herbert Daughtry. So he has been, I always tell people, all the good that I have done, I credit to Reverend Daughtry. All of the bad things I did, those are mine. He had nothing to do with it. Everybody I beat up and people's face I was in, even though he's like that too. But he is just my friend, and I consider him my spiritual father. And we definitely was looking forward to him coming on, but we're going to have him back on. But Dijanaba, you were excellent. Inez, you want to say something?
Just want to say that as we're talking about Pastor Herbert Daughtry, the pastor emeritus, bishop of the House of the Lord churches, I had been raised in the First AME Zion Church in Brooklyn, and I had been there from birth. I call that my ABC church, church of my ancestors, church of my birth, and church of my childhood, because I was there till I was 21. And I left when I was 21 because I didn't see the relevance of the church. I didn't see the involvement of the church in what was happening. That was in 1962, 63, when so much was happening. And it was later that I came to the House of the Lord Church, where we have a beautiful mural of Jesus Christ as Black, showing the way to other Black leaders that are portrayed there. So that whole interest of that whole presentation of Black liberation theology was what attracted me to the House of the Lord Church. And this coming January, I will be celebrating my 50th year as a member in that church.
Wow.
We've been so involved in so many things that have happened during that time. It was with our church where a hub of all the activity of what was going on during those times, demonstrations, protests, getting together to be able to say we're going to fight against the brutality that we see in our community. So certainly have to give those kudos. We were trying to get Dr. Karen Daughtry, who's now the minister at the House of the Lord Church, to come on, but I wasn't able to get. I sent her the link, so we were hoping that she would be able to join us. But Karen, if you're listening, Dr. Daughtry, if you're listening, check your phone, and we'd love to have you come on.
And speaking of Dr. Karen S. Daughtry, she was the leader and founder of Sisters Against South African Apartheid. They sent so much material to that, met Winnie Mandela and became good friends with Winnie Mandela and supported that struggle. So our sisters in the House of the Lord Church joined with Karen Daughtry. Reverend Jackson, his 1984 historic presidential campaign was launched at the House of the Lord Church.
Right.
And I know I became a part of the leadership around that campaign. We want people to be more consistent like they used to be, because sometimes people change over time. But that campaign was a historic one, and Reverend Daughtry was right there. So I got to have him.
That's a wonderful experience that you talked about, and I can relate to you, Sister Kamar, about your early life in the church. I joined the Shrine 54 years ago.
Okay.
Wow.
And one of the things when I first heard about the Shrine, one of the ministers, Reverend Dr. Woodrow Smith, came to visit our high school. This is before I joined. And I remember him writing his name on the board. And he wrote Rev. Woodrow Smith Jr. And I was like, what in the world? We got a preacher up in here? We in school. Why we got to listen to a preacher? And so he got up and he said, first of all, let me explain something to you. That REV stands for revolutionary. And when he said that caught my attention. And then he started talking about the Blackness of Jesus and Mary and how God was on the side of the oppressor, of the oppressed.
Wow.
And that really drew me in. And it gave me a sense of connection, because I realized that we were not in this by ourselves, that we had a spiritual foundation that we could build upon.
Kiru, they say Reverend Daughtry's waiting for the host to let him on. So could you check to see if he's in the room and can be let on? And he can at least get the last 5 minutes. They said he's in the room waiting for the host to let him on.
No, he's not on.
He's not on. Okay.
Yeah,
well, Sister Dijanaba, we thank you so much. We at our last 5 minutes, and we're so glad that you were able to come on. If you want to close
anytime, brother.
Oh, we're gonna.
As I said, when you give a preacher a microphone, you got to be careful.
Right. Well, microphone preacher, you can take the last 5 minutes, and then I'll close us out.
One of the things I want people to understand is that the state that we're in now as a people, it may look dire. It may look like things that's coming at us, bombarding us from every different side. But this is not unlike what we've been through before. We've been tested before. You know, our brothers and sisters doing the transatlantic slave trade, they were tested.
Right.
You know, when we were on a plantation, we were tested. During Jim Crow, we were tested.
That's right.
You know, during the Black Codes, we were tested. During segregation, we were tested. The Civil Rights Struggle, we were tested. The Black Conscious Movement, we were tested. So we've been tested, but we've also been resilient. You know, there's always been that spirit of resistance that we've had that's allowed us to overcome when we recognize that we have power within us. You know, just like in the scripture when Jesus said, anything I can do, you can do, and even greater things can you do. We all have an inner divinity.
Mhm.
God gave us an inner divinity, a spark of energy. People may call it something, may call it the spirit, they may call it revolutionary consciousness, but it's a divinity that we have within us.
That's right.
And the power can be magnified when we come together as a group. You know, as long as we try to try to be in competition with each other, that's not going to be a benefit to us.
Well,
We have to come together collectively.
Bishop, I think they're saying Karen S. Daughtry might be in the room. Is that so, Cairo? Can we get Sister Daughtry on? Cairo?
No, we don't have anybody else in the room.
Okay. All right.
Okay, she's trying.
Okay, she's trying. I'm sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to see if they. So, continue.
Well, I'm just saying that we have to understand that there's power that we have within us and we can use it collectively. You know, we can use our resources. For example, of course, everybody was really dismayed when over 300,000 Black women were laid off the federal payroll. But that talent is still there, and we can use that talent for our benefit. We don't have to tap into the man's system. We can tap into our own system. We can build our own economics. And I know Sister Kamara can attest to the fact that we're educators. We can teach our own children.
That's right.
That's right.
So they may want to ban books and take things out of the school. Then that means that as a church institution, we can create centers of learning that will teach our children our history.
Yes.
So she's in.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
And that's
okay.
certainly what the Shrine has done and what the House of the Lord Church did as well. We did create our own elementary school.
Sister Karen S. Daughtry, you're in.
Oh my God.
We got 3, 4, 5 minutes left. Go for it, Sister
Dr.
Daughtry.
Daughtry, introduce yourself to Bishop DeJohnava. I want to make sure that the two of you get to talk to each other.
Oh my God. This has been such a marvelous experience. I'm so excited and so thrilled and so invigorated by what the bishop has said. The work has been phenomenal.
Yes.
I'm not sure why the Reverend didn't get on. I'm away in the South visiting my mother's home in Charleston, South Carolina, but I did hear a couple of minutes ago, Brother Charles talked about Sisters Against South African Apartheid, which was one of the things that we did a lot of work around the anti-apartheid movement, called meetings. Because my husband challenged me on the way back from the caucus and said that I was saying, what's going on with Winnie Mandela? Nobody's doing anything. Why aren't the Black women, 100 Black women, the NAACP? And he looked up from his book and said, why don't you do something? And because I was not happy that, you know, he can challenge the mayor and challenge all the powers that be, but how dare he challenge me? And at that moment, I got quiet and went back home and called a meeting, and 30 women showed up. And that's when Sisters Against South African Apartheid was born. We had a 6-point program. I'm rushing because I know your time is limited, but we educated ourselves. We did public awareness. We got arrested. We collected 6 40-foot containers of material support items, sent them to the frontline states and directly into South Africa. Adelaide Tambo was our friend. Julie Belafonte was one of the ones that helped us. And we just believe that women have power that we sit on. Women came from the three states, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, that wanted to do something and felt powerless. But because we organized ourselves, we went to South Africa on 3 fact-finding trips after apartheid was done. We have a daycare center that we built in Tamboville, named after Oliver Tambo. So those are some of the things that, because we believe that there should not be a dichotomy between the social and the spiritual. And so Brother Charles and Sister Inez, we've walked in lockstep with them, have been friends and prayer partners, and align ourselves on issues that are related to the betterment and the forward moving of our people. And so I'm very excited. One of the other things I say is that with this whole thing now, we ain't buying You know, boy, we got to put our money where our mouth is and keep our money in our pockets.
That's
because
right.
the powers that be, they don't understand civility, they don't understand humanity, but they do understand where their money is affected. And so we can boast, the house of the Lord can boast that we closed down
That's
the
right.
downtown stores, 9 months of a boycott because Randolph Evans was killed. Thanksgiving Day, nobody would listen to us. We stopped Mayor Koch from speaking in Brooklyn, and we went on a 9-month boycott. And at the end of that boycott, May's department store, Martin's department store, and EJ Corvettes were closed. And they no longer exist. But guess what? The Randolph Evans Memorial Scholarship Fund was born. The Randolph Evans Crisis Fund was born. Black Veterans for Social Justice, which is all over Brooklyn, came out of those meetings right in our fellowship hall. And so these are the things that we have to galvanize, like the bishop said, our power. What can we do? We don't need to sit on the sidelines while elected officials come by and make a speech and you don't hear from them anymore until the next election. We need to understand that we have the power. And we just celebrated 46 years of giving scholarships in the name of Randolph Evans. So thank you all for having this broadcast. I'm not sure what happened to the Reverend, but I will let him know that the program was excellent. Yes. And of course, you know, come by and see the Black Messiah.
Oh yeah,
it's
on the wall.
That's what I also give people that opportunity to see the shrines of the Black Madonna here in Houston.
Absolutely.
On Martin Luther King Boulevard in Atlanta, on Abernathy Boulevard, and in Detroit on Linwood and Hobart.
Absolutely.
And also our cultural centers. And I'm glad you talked about that boycott, sister, because one of the things that we have a Buy Black marketplace that we support every month, where we have Black entrepreneurs coming from throughout the city and the state of Texas to sell, so we can circulate our Black dollars within the Black community.
Absolutely.
Let me close with this. We have two brothers and sisters. You heard two powerful, powerful sisters tonight. Pastor Daughtry, even with your 5 minutes, it was 5 minutes of fire. So we'll take it. And Sister Dijanaba, thank you so much. You know, we'll see you because we're in Atlanta now. We're going to see you on, oh no, you're in Detroit, Texas, right? Well, anyway, thank you both. We're going to have Reverend Daughtry. He just have to come on and do a solo by himself. That future, because that's my man. That's my heart. It's my soul, Reverend Dr. Herbert Daughtry. So as we say every week, as we end our program, we always say, the truth shall set you free, and power is the great equalizer. Black power.
Amen. Black power.
Promoted to Tashunda, together we shall win.
That's
there
right.
you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amen.